Hello everybody and a very warm welcome to Silverstone for the 10th round of the Formula V8 3.5 Championship. We're here at the home of the British Grand Prix for what promises to be another very exciting and entertaining race. We had plenty of drama yesterday as Roy Nissany scored his debut victory of the season, and Nissany out-qualified for pole by just 13 thousandths of a second this morning. So as you can see, this takes us to the midway point of the season, and then we have got the summer break before heading on to Red Bull Ring, Monza, Jerez and the circuit to Barcelona, Catalunya. Well, my name is Ben Evans, and here in the commentary box, which is just overlooking the pits, Silverstone's the cars heading out on their installation laps. And don't forget, today is the mandatory pit stop race. So yesterday was a straight race to the flag over 40 minutes plus one lap. Today, as ever, in the Formula V8 3.5 Championship, the second race of the weekend is the pit stop race, and they must come in and change at least 2 tyres at some point between laps 5 and 15. We're currently watching the car of Aurélien Panis, Aurélien who is third in the championship standings, which we'll have a look at now, behind Louis Delatraz and Tom Dillman. Dillman yesterday not having a super day en route to fourth, but nonetheless he outscored both Delatraz and Panis, and therefore consolidates his lead at the top of the standings. Let's take a look back then at the best of yesterday's action, and poleman Mathieu Vaxivière getting jumped by both Igor Yuruchov and Roy Nissany as they headed towards Copse for the first time. Also making ground early on was Aurélien Panis, but not for long, because it turned out that René Binder had an absolutely fantastic car underneath him, and it was the Austrian who was carving through the field early on. Firstly past Panis, then a super move on Tom Dillman, heading down the hanger straight into Stowe Corner around the outside of Dillman. Meanwhile, at the front of the field, it was getting very close between Yuruchov and Nissany. Nissany arguably having the quicker car, Yuruchov defending very well. It's further back, Alfonso Caylis having problems with a departing engine cover. This then was the big talking point of the race. Nissany diving to the inside of Yuruchov into Stowe. The door got closed, the pair of them made contact. Nissany, after the quick spin, was able to rejoin and in the lead of the race. But disappointment for the Arden team, because Yuruchov's car was damaged, as he found out a couple of corners later as it let go on the way into Abbey. That promoted Vaxivière and Binder into the podium positions and left a very, very disappointed Yuruchov to stalk back into the garages. So it was a win for Roy Nissany, his first in the championship. Second place going to Mathieu Vaxivière, and the rostrum being completed by René Binder, who was able to hold off Tom Dillman in the latter stages. But Dillman, on a poor day, for Delatraz extended his championship lead. We could be in for a repeat of yesterday's race again today, because it's the main protagonist once more at the front of the field. Mathieu Vaxivière, his third pole position in succession, but will he be able to convert this one?
So congratulations, Mathieu Vaxivière, for clinching the second pole here in Silverstone.
Yeah, thank you. No, we did a great job yesterday in quali. So I think the setup was fine for the quali, and also this morning. Now for us it was a disappointing day yesterday, so we worked quite hard yesterday to understand the problem during the race, why I have so much degradation. So I hope we solve that, and we will fight for the win.
Yesterday it was very shiny, very hot here, unusual hot. Today is very cloudy, fresher temperatures this morning, and I think it's going to stay there. How can you think it can affect to your performance, race performance today?
I think if we didn't solve completely the problem, it will be an help for us. But yeah, I'm quite confident. We will see what happens during the race. Maybe it will be also raining. I hope it will be dry to understand the problem for the rest of the season. But yeah, we will see during the race.
Thank you very much and good luck.
That was our pole sitter, Mathieu Vaxivière, and as he was alluding to, he has struggled despite having had 3 successive pole positions for race pace. He's also, yesterday, struggled to get the car off the line effectively. It meant he got jumped into the first corner by Yuruchov and this man, Roy Nissany. It's Nissany who lines up in second place, just 13 thousandths of a second off pole in qualifying. And Nissany really hitting a very rich vein of form. He had 2 second-place finishes in Paul Ricard. Victorious yesterday. It's brought him up to 4th in the championship, but he is the driver with all the momentum behind him. And it seems as if he and the Lotus team have really hit the sweet spot with the setup of the car, because René Binder, his teammate, has also been in blistering form. Binder has qualified 4th for today's race behind Igor Yuruchov, who lines up in 3rd. Yuruchov 2 wins to his credit already this year, but also, unfortunately, 4 retirements, including yesterday. He wants to start getting some nice, solid results, preferably on the podium under his belt, to start taking the points challenge to Tom Dillman. So the car's just coming to the end of their installation laps. There you can see, already poised on the grid.
So we are here with Paul Heath in Vortex Motorsport. He's a race engineer for Pietro Fittipaldi, one of the rookies of the championship this year. Well, probably you're one of the most experienced race engineers we have in the whole period of World Series.
Yeah, it's true. That makes me one of the oldest.
Oh, how has changed the way into working with the drivers? So now they come from other formulas. They're very well prepared. How has this easy your life in comparison with your Formula 3, Formula 3000 days in the past?
Well, the drivers are certainly younger. They've got more experience when they come to us than drivers of that age had like 10 and 15 years ago. Junior teams are now very well organised, and they have more money, they have more data, they have more information, and they can train and prepare the drivers better. So mainly by the time we get them, they're quite clever and they're quite switched on, even though they're sometimes 17, 18 years old.
Well, Pietro Fittipaldi, yesterday, he achieved his first podium as a rookie. Certainly, he doesn't come from any formula before. So how is this, and he's, this surname, Fittipaldi, isn't that too heavy to work with? How are you helping this driver to evaluate in this series, Paul?
We've got good driver coach, and we've got a lot of information from video. We've got a lot of information from previous seasons where we've been successful. He has had a sort of sudden rise to this level, so it's not easy for him. But we've got the tools in place, I think, to help him. He's a quick learner, he's a good lad, he listens to everything we say, so it's not been too difficult, even though he doesn't know a lot of the circuits. He's working hard, and I think we're trying to get there now.
Thank you very much, Paul, to be with us, and good luck for the race.
That's okay, my pleasure, thanks.
So the car's just forming up on the grid now. And really wonderful conditions motor racing. There is talk of rain a little bit later on this afternoon. I don't think it's going to affect the Formula V8 3.5 series. And so far this year we've had real entertainment every single race, and I'm sure that today's going to be no different. And this is when the element of strategy really starts to come to the fore as well, because the way that this championship works, it is the final stepping stone en route to Formula 1. We have seen the likes of Sebastian Vettel, Daniel Ricciardo coming through Formula V8 3.5s on to F1. Well, Mathieu Vaxivière, they're just talking to the team on the grid. The SMP team, a new squad to the championship this year, and they have absolutely cracked the qualifying setup, the ideal race setup, possibly still coming for them. But there's plenty more racing to go. Yesterday only took us to the halfway point of the season. Mathieu Vaxivière, he's 5th in the standings. He's only 50 or so points back from Tom Dillman. And so everything is still to be chased for. Here is Roy Nissany. And Nissany on just coming to a halt and maybe doing a couple of TV interviews on the grid as well. Igor Yuruchov, so disappointed with that contact yesterday with Roy Nassani. Yuruchov, who has always been a very, very robust defender, lightning starter as well, and he'll be hoping to chase his third win of the season. Rene Binder, been on the podium 3 times, never finished better than third. Surely victory is on the way between now and the end of the year, because in race mode he's been absolutely phenomenal. Aurélien Panis then starts in 5th, the second of the Arden cars, and again Gary Horner's team really excelling at their home round. Aurélien victorious in the most arrogant start of the season. Championship leader Tom Dillman lines up in 6th for the AVF squad, just 1 win to his credit, that came at the Hungaroring, but he's now not been on the podium in the last 3 races, and again facing an uphill task this afternoon. Real disappointment for Louis Delatraz, Dillman's main championship challenger, who finished 10th yesterday after starting from the pit lane and actually really struggling to progress through the field. Delatraz will be hoping for at least a top 5 finish to get his championship charge back on track. Well, Pietro Fittipaldi had a career best finish in 6th yesterday. He was the top rookie as well. He starts in 8th in the second of the Fortec cars. 9th place for Vitor Baptista, the reigning Euro Formula Open champion, running with the RP Motorsport team, who took him to that crown. Vitor 8th in yesterday's race. Fonzo Kalis, second AVF car. Disappointment yesterday, his engine cover coming loose, but he'd already been into the pits after some contact early on. He'll be hoping for a trouble 3 race and seeing if events come in his direction. The Teo Martin Motorsport team having a disappointing qualifying session. Yuki Amaru lining up in 11th place, once more out-qualifying his teammate Beitske Visser. Visser, however, was in the points yesterday with 9th place. She remains 13th in the championship. We'll have to hope to make some overtaking moves and for strategy to swing into her favour. And then it is Giuseppe Cipriani in the Durango car who'll line up in 13th. Cipriani has had a couple of points finishes this year. They came in the 2 races in tricky conditions at Spa-Francorchamps. So he has a final handshake with the mechanic before the grid gets cleared, and then they get dispatched on to the green flag formation lap. So it is a 40-minute plus 1 lap timed race. They must make that pit stop between laps 5 and 15. And so what we can expect to see is some of the cars coming in right at the opening of the window. Others will be coming in right at the very, very end of it. Depends which combination of tires they've gone from at the start. It will also depend as well as to how the early laps unfold and whether or not they do get caught in traffic. The front wheel, one big plus of the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit compared to some other venues, however, is that this is a track that is, relatively speaking, more straightforward to overtake on. There are plenty of golden overtaking opportunities, not least down the Hanger Straight into Stowe, also into the Vale that follows Stowe, and again into Village, and then down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands. The drivers also have DRS available to them to use during the race, either in offensive or defensive mode, and again that can have a bearing, particularly if drivers are able to keep some DRS in reserve for later on in the race. So the last couple of cars just being checked over. Nassani being strapped in, also some work as well on Aurélien Panis's car as the grid is cleared. We're just a few moments from racing. So the countdown well underway ahead of the 10th round of the Formula V8 3.5 championship season. There is the series principal, Jaime Alguersuari, in deep conversation with representative of the AVF team as they head to watch the start of the race from the pit boxes. So let's have a look at how they line up in full then. Pole position for Mathieu Vaxivière and Roy Nassani, yesterday's race winner, alongside him. Igor Yuruchov in 3rd. He'll be hoping to make it to the flag, and Rene Binder starts from 4th, and I'm sure will be pushing for the victory. Then Aurélien Panis and Tom Dillman, all French, 3rd row, clear of Louis Delatraz and Pietro Fittipaldi, and all Fortec row 4. completing the top 10, it is Vitor Baptista and Alfonso Celis, and Matteo Martin Motorsport teammates Yukan Amaru and Bates Gavissa in 11th and 12th, with Giuseppe Cipriani for the Durango team starting from 13th. The heat haze shimmers off the cars as they head off onto their green flag lap now. And surely the key for Vaxivière is going to be to make the good start. Yesterday, he lost 2 places off the line to Nassani and Yurudshov. And there's every risk for Vaxivière that the same is going to happen again. Louis Delatraz, there we see in the number 1 car, the black and red entry. Well, he lost the engine as they came to the grid at the end of the formation lap yesterday. Had to start the race from the pit lane as a result. And Louis needing to take some more points off Tom Dillman. He's able to close the gap a little bit at Paul Ricard with victory in race 2. But nonetheless, he comes into the race this afternoon 33 points adrift of Dillman. He's got Aurélien Panis snapping in his heels, and then the resurgent Roy Nassani and René Binder for the Lotus team rapidly climbing up the points table as well. Well, they qualified for this race earlier on today, and the track conditions haven't really changed significantly since then. It is a much warmer day than possibly the cloud cover suggests, but still quite overcast. And the track nicely rubbered in from the weekend's racing. We haven't had any rain overnight, so the groove that was established during yesterday has remained. We've had lots of big, heavy cars out qualifying as well through the course of the morning, so that the racing line is going to be extremely grippy. It does make overtaking a little bit more challenging as they swing through Club heading up towards Abbey. We're using the Woodcote to Copse start and finish straight this weekend rather than the Club to Abbey starting grid that you'll see used with some other categories. And that puts a slightly different complexion on the sector times that we have during the race. Also a slightly different complexion into where we'll see the challenges in the first lap of the race as well. I'm joined by Keith Collentine, who's sprinted up here from the grid. And what's the news?
Well, it's, as you were saying, really, Ben, the conditions much the same as yesterday. Perhaps the only major exception is we have got the Silverstone winds picking up a little bit, blowing mainly in the direction down the Hanger Straight from Stowe Corner. So that might be helpful for the drivers when it comes to trying to get into the slipstream of their rivals and trying to make an overtaking move along that part of the circuit. But other than that, all looking pretty much straightforward. The SMP Racing guys earlier on were paying a lot of attention to the engine installation around the back of Mathieu Vaxivier's car. Of course, we know he swapped his engine over. We think he probably used the one that would have been in Matevos Isakian's car, but obviously Isakian not racing here this weekend. So I think SMP just double checking, making sure everything absolutely okay. And the only other thing to pick up on was Delatraz yesterday. We commented on the difficulties he was having making his way up through the grid. He had some braking problems in his Fortec car. And he was really quick in qualifying as well, but wasn't out right at the peak of the conditions at the very, very end of the session, which is perhaps why he's a little bit further down the grid than he should be. He could be in a good position to pick up some places in the race.
Well, the cars coming to the grid, getting ready for the start. They make the most magnificent noise. If you want racing car engines to sound as they should, then this championship is the place for you. The last couple of cars come into position. We're about to go racing for the 10th time this year in the Formula V8 3.5 Championship. As everybody looks the gantry, the red lights are on. They're out. We're racing at Silverstone once more. It's another terrible start from Mathieu Vaxivière, who loses out to 3-4 cars as they turn into Copse. And it is Roy Nassani who leads. René Binder goes second. Yurudshov third. Vaxivière is fourth. They're cleanly through onto Magnussen and Beckett as Vaxivière darts back past Yurudshov. He reclaims third position, and then in fourth, it's the Russian. Fifth, Aurélien Panis. Sixth, Tom Dillman. Seventh, Pietro Fittipaldi. It's been a poor start for Louis Delatraz. He has been shuffled down the pack somewhat, but look at the progress of Roy Nassani. He is romping clear at the front of the pack.
And Vaxivière coming under attack from Orojev as they come into Stowe for the first time. Orojev really going around the long way around the outside at Stowe. Is he going to make that work? Yes, he has. So changing places again. The two SMP-backed drivers, Vaxivière trying to get around the outside into Club, but Orojev has taken the place back. And a little bit further back as well, I see Louis Delatraz taking back one of the places he lost. He also didn't get away from the line very well.
Unbelievably aggressive first lap from Yurudshov as he has move back into third. Vaxivière down to fourth. Pietro Fittipaldi showing strongly as Tom Dillman under pressure from Louis Delatraz, who goes around the outside of Abbey. But as they head towards Village, Dillman forces the move to the inside to reclaim the place. That was brave stuff from Tom Dillman as Alfonso Calis and Vitor Baptista join in the party. Baptista going for a move to the inside that was possibly not going to work out. Shirutshov defends from Vaxivière as they dart down the Wellington Straight for the first time, and the Russian covers the inside line. Vaxivière can't draw alongside to challenge to the outside at Brooklands. Shirutshov then covers the inside at Luffield, but of course this is bringing Aurélien Panis and Pietro Fittipaldi into the fight. It's also allowing the two Lotus cars to romp clear at the front of the field as Dillman and Delatraz continue their battle. Louis Delatraz to the outside of the bright orange AVF car of Tom Dillman as they sprint towards Copse Corner for the second time of asking who's got the bravery. Both of them is the answer as Delatraz and Dillman run wide. Delatraz just now gets his nose in front.
Delatraz around the outside, both drivers fully off the circuit there. Incredibly brave stuff from Delatraz. But as you say, Ben, while all that scrapping is going on behind them, Nissany delivering a superb first lap, 1.5 seconds quicker than anybody else. So the Lotus cars up out ahead, and it looks like Vaxivière is going to get some attention from Panis as they come down to Stowe. But again, it just seemed like Vaxivière didn't have as much push as he should have coming down the straight that first time. How easily Origev was able to slipstream up onto the back of him. I can only assume Origev was using his DRS, but there goes Panis down the inside now, and once again Vaxivière losing out.
That work you saw going on the grid on the engine of Vaxivière's car, they must have picked up concern, one could hypothesise, on the installation lap. Here is another look then at the move from Louis Delatraz on Tom Dillman. Wow, that is unbelievably close. They give each other not a millimetre more than they need, as now Vitor Baptista comes onto terms with Alfonso Calis in the fight for 9th and 10th. The silver RP Motorsport car of Baptista looks to the outside of the orange AVF entry of Calis, but the Mexican Calis holds his line, but that is going to bring Kanemaru in the first of the Teo Martin Motorsport cars into play.
There is hardly not a driver in the field at the moment who isn't having some sort of scrap. The only exception would appear to be Nissany, who's drawing clear at the front. Vaxivière looks really, really quick, or quickest at least around the corners, but just not so strong on the straights. And one of the other things I did notice on the grid was he really had got that rear wing cranked up to the absolute maximum. There was not a hole higher he could have gone on that rear wing. So I'll be interested to discover how his tyre management works during the course of this race, and whether he's able to get a bit more instant performance out of his tyres after the pit stop.
Well, that was what he was saying in the interview post-qualifying, was that they know they've got a very good car over a single lap. It's getting a car that's going to work over 42 minutes or so of racing as we're going to have this afternoon. Now, what about the championship leader, Tom Dillman? He is in 8th place, and this is a race where he's potentially going to be giving away a lot of ground to his rivals, and less things work out in his favour. We've got one car under investigation. That is Aurélien Panis. And possibly, if that's for track limits, he's just run over them again on the exit of Stowe as the French driver for the Arden team chases his Arden teammate Igor Yurutshov as they pick their way through the Vale and Club. Here is a replay, meanwhile, of Igor Yurutshov running incredibly wide at Copse, as did Panis.
Indeed, and then Delatraz and Dillman, who are having their overtaking move behind them. But yeah, Origev completely showing a total disregard for the geometry of Silverstone, and Panis has picked up some front wing damage at somewhere.
He's taken one of the corner markers with him as a souvenir, and that is going to be doing no wonders at all for his airflow. It also may well bring him into the pits to get that removed, because if it flies off into the traffic, that could be a little bit of a safety concern.
Yeah, I'm no Adrian Newey, but I suspect that's what McLaren might describe as suboptimal airflow. And sure enough, you can see it hurting him in the Brooklands corner. He's washing out wide, and Vaxivière prowling around the outside of Luffield and trying to get a launch at him. I'm amazed that the corner markers managed to hang on so firmly to that front wing end plate.
Vaxivière thought for a moment about a challenge into Copse. You'll see if Panis understeers outright on the exit. Indeed he does. There goes the corner marker. Handling restored for Panis, but it gives Vaxivière the chance to challenge into Beckett's. We know that Vaxivière is a very, very brave overtaker, but he can't make the move stick. But what it's also doing is allowing Pietro Fittipaldi and Louis Delatraz, the two Fortec cars, to join the scrap. Here is a look at the eventual release into freedom of the corner marker.
Yeah, shades of Ayrton Senna getting rid of his broken front wing at Suzuka in 89, but there goes Vaxivière, swamped by the Fortec drivers.
Brilliant move from Pietro Fittipaldi around the outside, and Delatraz also looked to the inside, and Vaxivière really struggling on the long hanger straight for outright pace, and for all the ability and grip he's got through the corners. Unfortunately, it means that those around him are able to find a way past. This, by the way, is the fight for fourth. Roy Nissany leads from René Binder. Igor Yuruchov's in third. Aurélien Panis, that red and white car, the traditional Arden colours, in fourth. From now, Pietro Fittipaldi, Mathieu Vaxivière, Louis Delatraz, Tom Dillman and Vitor Baptista.
Vaxivière trying to reclaim that place, but just before the Fortec drivers caught up to Vaxivière, Delatraz had lopped well over a second out of Fittipaldi's previous lap, so he was catching his teammate very quickly indeed, and they're all looking a bit racy again as they come around. But once again, Tom Dillman not really showing the sort of pace we saw in the opening few rounds from him, where he was constantly up there on the podium, but he's having a fairly indifferent weekend, and he can only really count himself lucky that his closest rivals in the championship aren't in a position to really punish him for it. The two Lotus drivers who are leading the race are a bit further back, and Delatraz at the moment is only just running in front of him, and of course Delatraz had such a poor run yesterday.
Well, we are at the end of lap 4, and the pit window is going to be opening fairly soon. That's from lap 5 to 15, and you just wonder whether or not the Fortec team might be pulling in Louis Delatraz fairly promptly, as he's part of this scrap, and it's now the turn of Pietro Fittipaldi to be the cork in the bottle. Aurélien Panis, having raced his way through, is beginning to romp clear, and Vitor Baptista closing up to this train as well, and you can see how the leading group of cars have all been reasonably spread out, and then we've got this queue behind Fittipaldi. Vaxivière, interestingly, can stay with Fittipaldi in the tow, but he can't really gain any ground, but he just does enough to keep Louis Delatraz at bay. And then Delatraz has got Dillman. Dillman's mirror is now being filled by Vitor Baptista, then the gap back to Kaylis in 10th.
Delatraz looking very, very solid and steady on the slightly tighter inside line at Stowe in the slipstream of Vaxivière. But as you say, Panis not seeming to suffer any lingering after effects of having that corner marker stuck to his front wing, and he is beginning to edge clear of this little battle now, leaving Pietro Fittipaldi, who got his best results of the season so far in yesterday's race. He could improve on it today if he finishes where he is at the moment, but judging by how quick the cars behind him are, he might struggle with that a little bit. And Vaxivière also struggling a little bit to get the power down as they come out of Village and the Loop, and even pulling off the racing line a little bit there, but I don't think he was under that much pressure from Delatraz.
Maybe just preemptively showing Louis Delatraz that he's aware that he is on the march and on the prowl, and once more another pole position for...
Oh, and Vaxivière into the pits, followed by Dillman.
Yep, so the pit window is open now. It's open from laps 5 to 15. Just to remind you, as Fittipaldi also in and on the pit limiter a lot earlier than Mathieu Vaxivière would have liked. So they run down towards the Fortec pit. The SMP pit as well is going to be nice and busy. And it's new rears going on for Vaxivière, who rejoins just behind Tom Dillman. So a brilliant pit stop from the AVF team to squirt Dillman out, having jumped both Fittipaldi and Vaxivière.
Yeah, that was an excellent turnaround for Dillman. It didn't go so well for him in that team earlier on in the year, but he got away very nicely indeed. I would have liked to have seen them rejoin the circuit, because it looked as though Vaxivière was retaining a sort of lingering hope of trying to stay alongside him, but not quite. But I think Delatraz will be very pleased to have seen his teammate and Vaxivière getting out of the way in front of him, because he had some seriously good pace in that car. But speaking of seriously good pace, Roy Nissany's just produced the fastest first section of the race, so I suspect he won't be fancying getting rid of those tyres anytime soon.
Without wishing to put the curse of the commentator on Roy Nissany, I'll just leave this fact hanging, that we haven't had a double race winner yet this season across a race weekend. Now here is another look at Vaxivière rejoining, and Tom Dillman will probably be saying something along the lines of na 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 into the helmet there, because that was a perfectly executed pit stop for the AVF team, and it jumps Dillman 2 places. And we've been talking about Tom Dillman in the context of the championship. The Paul Ricard weekend didn't quite go his way. It's been another challenging weekend at Silverstone, But when you're having one of those years that could take you to the crown, you just seem to get the rub of the draw like that.
It certainly is working out very nicely like that, but look at that lap time from Roy Nassani just there, almost a full second quicker than anybody had gone in the race up to that point, so he's definitely flying at the moment while the rest of the drivers come in to make the pit stops. He doesn't want to get caught out like he did at Paul Ricard. There goes Aurélien Panish with a fresh set of rear Michelin boots on his Arden Run car, so that's going to release Delatraz a little further.
Well, Roy Nassani really doesn't want to have the pit stop, does he? Because he has got perfect control over the race. Meanwhile, Bates Gavissa also in the Teo Martin pit. And what these early pit stops are suggesting is there aren't really the concerns that we've seen at some of the other circuits actually about tyre wear. And talking to the teams this weekend, they've all been saying, yeah, that the tyre is doing a really good job of being durable through the race. But I just wonder whether or not maybe the Lotus team have decided to go with a newer set of tyres for Nassani and Binder and then gamble on getting the jump off the line, which, my goodness, it worked. And now the lead that Nassani's got over Binder is 2.7 seconds. He leads Urutshov by 6 seconds, and then Louis Delatraz 11 seconds back.
Well, of course, remembering what we saw in yesterday's race, that the Lotus guys had such tremendous pace. They may have just come into this race thinking, if we just postpone the pit stop, we can, we know that when our cars get into some clean air, they're going to be super quick, as Roy Nassani's just proved with that belting fastest lap. So really, however things play out, the strategic advantage is going to play in our favour, because we know we're going to be able to get our cars into clear air. And sure enough, they come by to start their 7th lap of the race, and they still show no signs of wanting to come into the pits. But I wonder if Delatraz might be...
So into the pit lane comes Louis Delatraz as the two Lotuses continue on their way. As Delatraz rolls in, this should be reasonable. Oh no, there's a slight delay at the rear of the car, and that has just cost Delatraz a second or so for my money. And so what it means is that everybody, with the exception of Giuseppe Cipriani, Yuki Kanemaru, and the two Lotuses plus Urutshov, have come in. Vitor Baptista also to pit for the RP team. Now, what we sometimes see, Keith, when you've got two teammates running like this, is that the Lotus team will bring in René Binder almost as a secondary equipment check. They'll have tested the air guns in the pit box, but they'll bring in Binder, make sure that pit stop goes smoothly, and then bring in Nassani. Yeah,
of course, there is sometimes, particularly in Formula One, where tyre strategy plays such a big role, the concern that the first driver you bring in is going to gain advantage because they'll be on quicker, fresher tyres sooner. But in this category, obviously, we're only going to be changing one set of tyres, or two tyres at the back of the car. It doesn't make that big of an effect. But we've got some news of a setback for Panis.
Yes, he's going to be dropped one place in the final race classification of a breach of Article 24.3. And so that is going to be a real disappointment for Panis. Meanwhile, the race leaders heading through, or do they? Because into the pit lane now comes René Binder from second place. We are on lap 9 of the race. Nassani completes his 8th, and now this is an important pit stop for the Lotus team. René Binder yet to finish above 3rd so far this season. As he comes to a halt, the team get to work with the rear tyres. Also in is Igor Urutshov behind for the Arden squad. And, well, the first job done, Keith, for Lotus. They've serviced Binder, got him out well clear of Urutshov.
Yes, just as the sages foretold, they brought Binder in first. And actually, one thing we haven't quite seen in the pits yet is just before this race started, there was a fuel spillage about halfway down the pits. And the Silverstone marshals diligently sprang to work with lots of detergent and water to get it all cleaned up. But a few of the drivers who will have changed their tyres before crossing that will have picked up a little bit of moisture on their tyres, but I think probably not enough to have had a significant effect.
Roy Nassani leads the way with 25 minutes plus a lap remaining. He is one of just a couple of drivers yet to make his pit stop, and he's just set the fastest first sector of anybody in the race so far. And now, this afternoon, we're really seeing Nassani's true potential. He was so quick in Paul Ricard, but he was in traffic. He was never in clear air. He was never out front. Yesterday, when he got out front, he broke clear of the rest of the field. Today, he's taken it from the very first corner and is building up a supreme buffer at the front of the field. The question, of course, now is whether or not he's going to come in at the end of this lap or continue on and set the fastest lap of the race, because he sets the fastest middle sector as well. He's still got 6 laps or so in this pit window before it closes, but he does come in at the end of lap 9. Now this a key moment for Roy Nissany. He will be hoping the pit stop goes very smoothly, because all the practice the team's put in, it's still in the pits where the race can't necessarily be won, but it can potentially go away. Beautifully done there by Lotus, and Nissany back underway without any problems. It does mean, though, that Yukan Maru, who is playing the long game with his strategy, I think is So Yukan Maru takes the lead of the race because he has not had his pit stop, and Roy Nissany emerges in isolation, and it would appear from the angle we've seen he's probably gained a little bit of time over René Binder.
It was a pretty clean pit stop, a slight hesitation on the right rear tyre, just getting it onto the thread, but not a great problem for him otherwise. We've got a bit more detail on what's been going on with Panis. Sure enough, he's had the black and white flag now for running too wide at Copse.
My mistake, it's Vitor Baptista who leads the race. He is the other driver who's not pitted in from Yukan Maru. And Kanemaru, who was triumphant last year in the Euro Formula Open on the Silverstone Grand Prix, so it's a track that he knows and likes. We'll be hoping he, at the very least, will be able to maintain his advantage over Bike Skavissa, might possibly get the jump on Alfonso Calis. Now, the driver who's really lost out through this pit sequence is Louis Delatraz. He is in 9th at the moment, and depending on how the RP Motorsport pit stop goes, he might climb to 7th, he might climb to 8th, depending on where Vitor Baptista feeds back in.
Yeah, we saw him have that slightly slow pit stop, and of course, you remember before the pit stops began, he was in such a close train of traffic that having any kind of delay on his pit stop was always going to hold him a bit. But we see the sole RP Motorsport car this weekend in the V8 category running up at the front of the field. Of course, they had that win back at the Hungaroring with Johnny Cecotto Jr. earlier on in the season. But Vitor Baptista making his big step up to these big, powerful cars, still getting to grips them a bit, but he has the opportunity to run at the front and in a bit of free air, and I'm sure he'll be enjoying that very much before he has to come in and make that mandatory pit stop.
Now, I think this strategy could work very well for Baptista in terms of his battle with Alfonso Calis, because Baptista last time around was half a second quicker than Calis, however, he was 3/10 slower than Louis Delatraz. So of those that have pitted, the order is Roy Nissany from René Binder, Igor Yuruchov, Aurélien Panis and Tom Dillman. So Vaxivière and Delatraz, the two big losers from the pit stops. We're on lap 11 of the race. We're just about to approach half race distance. And Vitor Baptista, the team will be saying to him, Keith, on the radio, just put in a series of qualifying laps.
Yeah, he's definitely pushing it. You can see he was actually running a little bit wide through Stowe Corner. He had just a little bit of a twitch in that very, very high-speed right-hander, but nothing too drastic. He's not running at quite the pace the leaders were able to earlier on. He's about 1.4 seconds slower than it at the moment. But there is our effective race leader, Roy Nissany, currently in 3rd position. He has slightly edged that lead out over his teammate René Binder, but this is looking like being a superb weekend for Lotus. The Charouz-run team, having had both their drivers on the podium yesterday, they stand to do it again today, but going one better with a potential 1-2 in the offing for them here.
Nissany swings in to Brooklands for the 11th time of asking, in towards Luffield. It's a never-ending right-hander. Just when you think you've come to the end of the corner, it still keeps going, and only then feeds you out into Woodcote, which in the dry has always been a relatively transactional corner. In the wet, it is absolutely terrifying. And then into Copse, where you just turn in and let the aerodynamic and mechanical grip of the car do its work, and then you don't quite get a sense of from the TV pictures. You do come over a slight crown in the road, slight crest, before you swoop into Maggots and Beckett's. And Nissany, his lead over René Binder out to 4.8 seconds. Binder, in turn, 4.4 seconds clear of Yuruchov. And the battle probably to watch for is that Mathieu Vaxivière in 8th in the SMP car. The Pulsar is snapping all over the heels of the AVF entry of Tom Dillman in the fight for 7th and 8th. They're separated by just about half a second or so. And as they're battling, it's allowing Aurélien Panis to escape in 6th. And actually, Dillman and Vaxiviere, they've got to watch themselves here because as they fight, they're losing time to Vitor Baptista, who was part of that scrap pre-pit stops. And so Baptista, with a good service from the RP team, could be on for a strong result. Here we see the scrap then. Aurélien Panis in the Arden car, then the orange machine of Dillman. Vaxiviere tucked up behind him, and Louis Delatraz once more just struggling for raw pace.
He really is. He's not come back into it after that setback at the pit stop. As we said, he had a braking problem during yesterday's race, which presumably they gave some attention to, but perhaps he's not been able to sort it out. Dillman actually a little bit offline as they went into the sharp left-hander at the loop, and now they come through Aintree, but Vaxiviere just doesn't seem to have that purchase and launch off the corners to be able to get a run at his rivals coming down the longer straights. But look how good Vaxiviere is on the brakes as they come into Brooklands, and actually perhaps that's slightly because he's run a little bit wide, but trying to put Tom Dillman under some semblance of pressure.
I don't think that was a mistake though from Vaxiviere. That was actually quite smart driving. He was looking to the inside Dillman, who shut the door, and Vaxiviere just eased off the brakes, made sure he didn't scrub off the momentum, which would have been very easy to do by flinging in for a little bit too tight a line at Brooklands. Heads out of Copse, in pursuit of Dillman. Panis looking to try and run away a little bit. Now they are lapping in the 1 minute 45.5s, as actually on that last occasion was Vitor Baptista.
And Vaxiviere definitely wide in that part of Beckett's as he was in the slipstream of Dillman. But they're definitely in that phase where, you know, if Vaxiviere were just to even try to make a move on Dillman, we saw yesterday just how much time you can lose by scrapping and getting offline, and that really could hand a useful little advantage to Baptista. It certainly makes sense at this stage in the race for RP Motorsport to gamble and just leave Baptista out until the end of the pit window, because the only thing that could scupper him would be if the safety car came out, which with the vast expanses of space we have here at Silverstone isn't as high a risk as it is at some other circuits.
And also for both Vitor Baptista and Yu Kanemaru, they are relatively inexperienced in this category. Kanemaru did the half season last year. Vitor Baptista, it's his first year in the cars. Enjoy the clear air, enjoy the chance to get some miles under your belt and see if events swing into your favour as well. And again, Vaxiviere through the slow corners, he is extremely strong. Now I think the plus side here for the SMP team, Keith, is going to be that as Vitor Baptista comes in now, that the car is lasting and is still turning in this deep into the race, which has been the problem in preceding rounds.
Yeah, they've definitely had problems with their late sort of race setup on that car in terms of how it works later on in an event. Here comes Baptista for service from RP. No chance for them to get a practice pit stop done on his teammate because he hasn't got one this weekend, and it looks like Kanemaru also in for Teo Martin further back. So here comes Tom Dillman. Where is he going to be relative to Baptista? It's going to be, I think Baptista hasn't. There he was, just making it out of the pits. So no, it was a few seconds away from being able to make that work.
And it means that Louis Delatraz is going to jump up into 7th place when all is said and done, as Abba once said. And then we'll have Roy Nissany resuming in the lead of the race. And for Nissany, well, this has been coming for the past few rounds. He's had the pace underneath him, and now he's putting together the sort of drive that he'll have absolutely dreamed about, because as a driver, you really enjoy those spectacular ones where you pull a do-or-die move on the last lap to win it. You also enjoy those days when you're just able to run away from the rest of the field. Yeah,
he's just out there enjoying himself now and stretching out that advantage, and a double win in one weekend and being the first driver to do that this year really will inject him with a bit of confidence. But just looking at his results before we came here and took that win yesterday, he had a pair of second places at Paul Ricard. He had a really duff weekend at Spa-Francorchamps where he didn't score anything, but he was also second in the rain at the Hungaroring, so the pace has definitely been there, and you have to say, without that completely pointless weekend at Spa-Francorchamps, you'd be talking about him as a potential championship contender, but it's certainly not the case that he's out of it at this stage. If he's able to keep producing drives of this quality, and if Dillman's going to keep languishing off the podium, you know, we could be in for a very interesting second half of the season.
Absolutely. I mean, there are still an awful lot of points left on the table, because we have got 8 races to come at the end of today, from the Red Bull Ring, Monza, Jerez, and the Circuit to Barcelona and Catalunya, as we have the run-in towards the end of the season. Now, Igor Yuruchov in 3rd. He will be, I think, glad of a trouble-free run once more, because he's had 4 retirements already this season, playing 3 podiums. This would make it 4 apiece if things stay as they are. He's got his teammate Aurélien Panis, though, behind him. Panis 4 seconds back, and actually lapping a little bit more slowly on that last occasion. Then we've got Tom Dillman, the championship leader, behind Panis in 5th place. And again, for Tom Dillman, it's not been a dream day, but it's going to be another solid points finish. He's going to outscore Louis Delatraz once more as things stay as they are. He's going to outscore Mathieu Vaxivière once more if things stay as they are. And so, although Roy Nassani, although René Binder are going to increase their push towards the championship, Dillman's still, provided he doesn't fall off the road or something goes wrong, going to be leaving Silverstone with a very healthy championship advantage.
Indeed, and not a driver we've actually really had much cause to speak about in the race so far, and the same was the case yesterday, because he wasn't really up in the hunt for the big points for most of the way. I'm curious to see it go that way, because we said yesterday, you know, when he was at Paul Ricard, that was the first time he'd driven on that long version of the circuit, surprisingly enough for a driver of his experience. But Silverstone is a circuit he knows tremendously well. He raced here in these cars last year, raced here in GP2 and other categories, and surprising to see him not having a particularly good weekend. And you know, Vaxivière, who's obviously got some problems still with the setup in his SMP car, quite easily able to stay on the back of Dillman. And really, of course, you know, the only reason Dillman's been able to get ahead of him was because Vaxivière's pit stop wasn't quite as fast. And still, even as things stand, we've got about a quarter of an hour of racing still to go. Vaxivière, you know, looking one of the likeliest drivers out there to perhaps put a pass on the driver in front of him.
The other big loser from the pit stops was Pietro Fittipaldi, who has slipped down into 12th place. We didn't see the end of that pit stop from the Fortec team, but Pietro was right up there, and his lap times are considerably quicker than the cars he's chasing, Alfonso Calis and Beitske-Visser, so he might yet get himself into the points as, again, Vaxivière chasing Tom Dillman down the hangar straight, but he can't close enough onto Dillman to launch the challenge into Stowe. And Tom Dillman, he's been racing at this level, at the sharp end at this level, for many seasons now. He knows pretty much every trick in the book about keeping his rivals behind him. And he's also just starting to nibble away at Aurélien Panis' advantage, because we're getting to that final quarter of the race where over-aggression, pushing too hard on the Michelin tyres, now going to come back and bite.
Yeah, and the first person to taste that was Vaxivière, who made the mistake of touching that fearsome high inside curb. They've got a club corner which really spat his car out wide and disrupted his pursuit of Dillman. But a driver who did have a bit of a problem the last time by, René Binder, had a very slow lap and lost over 1.5 seconds to Nissany. So Nissany's lead now well over 8 seconds. So he's got a very generous buffer up at the front. So Nissany able to take it easy from this point on, but Vaxivière, having had that slight slip up, trying to now get, and once again you could see him just in the background of that shot doing what you said earlier on, Ben, letting the car trail brake deep into Brooklands corner. Not able to queue him up for a pass on Dillman, but just sustaining the pressure for now. And I tell you what, another not particularly quick lap for Binder up front. He's potentially going to be caught by Igor Urochev if he continues to lap at this pace, and that puts Nissany's lead almost up to 10 seconds now.
Yeah, Igor Urochev now just 2.5 seconds back from René Binder. The other battle that's coming together is for 7th and 8th, because Vitor Baptista is steadily closing up onto the tail of Louis Delatraz. That came down by 0.3 seconds last time around, and we've still got 11 minutes plus a lap remaining. Thank you very much for joining us at Silverstone this afternoon for the live action from the Formula V8 3.5 Championship. The Lotus team watch the monitors from the pit wall. Here is René Binder now. Is there anything we can spot that's possibly just causing his times to drop away? Now that's interesting. It's through the first sector. He's giving away a couple of tenths of a second to Nissany. You've now got Urochev looking ever larger in his mirrors. Now let's see what Binder can offer up in sector 2 relative to Igor Urochev. Oh, and he just locks the brake. Urochev much sharper on the turn in. Gets the Arden car nipping to the inside. Here they come out of sector 2. It is, waiting for the time screen, 46.5 for Binder to 46.3 for Urochev, so he's gained a couple of tenths of a second.
Yeah, I think mainly the what strikes you there is how much slower Binder is compared to his teammate. I wonder if he's got a particularly more well-worn set of tyres on for the final phase of this race. That may also offer an explanation for why Lotus wanted to run so deep into this race. We've got the yellow flags out
at Beckett's. The reason for that, I think, is Pietro Fittipaldi, who hasn't come through the first sector on this last lap, and that would be a real shame for Pietro. We'll find out in a moment, as they're about to swing through the affected section of the circuit. There is Yaruchov. There's the waved yellow flags. Where is Pietro Fittipaldi's car? Nowhere near the circuit is the answer. So hopefully, Pietro, that wasn't anything going too spectacularly wrong for him. And certainly didn't seem to be near enough the track to cause any concerns with the introduction of a safety car. Oh, and that has been a poor first sector for Igor Yaruchov. He's lost about 0.7 of a second relative to Rene Binder, and so that gap goes out to over 3 seconds.
I wonder if he was perhaps backing off a little more for the double wave yellow flags than some of his rivals were.
And here is the reason. It is Pietro Fittipaldi, who has just parked the front of the car in the gravel trap, and a very frustrated Brazilian walks away. It's a shame, because this was the feistiest that Pietro had been looking so far this season. He went really well yesterday. He was right in the thick of the action early on in this race, but unfortunately maybe just pushing a little bit too hard to get onto terms with Botska Visser and Alfonso Calis.
That has, well, not too many drivers have benefited from that, because he was already running towards the back of the field anyway. But meanwhile, our race leader, Roy Nassani, just continues to stretch his advantage, and I think the bit of time that Binder gained over Aruchev on that lap has pretty much settled down the battle for second place now. So we return our attention to Mathieu Vaxivière, who will be getting thoroughly fed up of looking at the back of Tom Dillman's car, as he has done ever since he came out of the pit lane behind him after their mandatory pit stops. And Vaxivière, you know, he was super quick around this track last year, had that fantastic battle with Oliver Rowland, but it's just been yet another chapter in his book of woe in 2016 this season. Slightly
unusual there, though, that Vaxivière had the DRS on from the run out of Luffield through towards Copse Corner, which isn't somewhere that you're particularly likely to overtake unless you're right behind the car in front through Luffield, as they then swing through Beckett and out of Chapel Curve onto the Hanger Straight. But it just begs the question as to whether or not Vaxivière has got plenty of DRS to play with. But then he doesn't deploy it down the Hanger Straight, which would surely give him more joy in terms of challenging Tom Dillman.
Perhaps he was just trying to get a little bit closer for the run through Magnus and Beckett, as Dillman gets a little bit greedy with the runoff at the exit of Stowe Corner. Perhaps he was just trying to get in a position to get a good run out of there, in the hope that it'd be a little bit closer to Dillman, and it would be worth him using the DRS on the Hanger Straight, but when he wasn't, he decided not to.
Now, Dillman's pace has really dropped off. Last lap, a 1:45.8 as he's defending from Vaxivière. It means that Louis Delatraz is inviting himself to this party, and we'll be hoping that Vaxivière and Dillman can continue to keep dicing, because if Delatraz could poach a couple of places, finish ahead of Dillman, it certainly livens up his title challenge. And it would seem as if Dillman is now the driver who's struggling a little bit for traction coming out of the corners, and is just having to be a little bit more hesitant, getting the throttle down to accelerate down the Wellington Straight into Brooklands. We're on lap. These cars coming to the end of lap 19. The race leader Roy Nassani already well into lap 20.
Yeah, Vaxivière's driving really does bear all the hallmarks of a driver who's trying to wring every last drop out of his car in the corners, because he's just not quite as quick down the straights, and that is where Dillman edges away. Particularly coming out of Village and the Loop, we saw Vaxivière, the back of the car twitching ever so slightly that last time by, as he wasn't quite able to get the power down as well as he needed to, and that is why, again, you come through these super quick corners, he really is able to live with the disturbed air from Dillman's car very well. And actually, the pair of them look a little bit closer to Aurelien Panis this time by.
Certainly do. Now, this time around, it's DRS time for Vaxivière down the Hanger Straight, and he might try something into the Vale on this occasion, especially as Dillman looks as if he's going to run a little bit wide out of Stowe. Are we going to see the challenge here from Vaxivière? No. He's not quite close enough, but he's now really forcing Dillman to take notice. Completely agree with you, Keith. That last lap from Aurelien Panis was a 1:45.9, and that played a 1:45.5 from a defending Dillman. So Panis possibly starting to struggle a little bit too. This now becomes the fight for 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th, because Delatraz is still hovering at the back of the train.
Yeah, New Connemara has joined the club of drivers who've been warned about track limits, to which I know Vaxivière is already a member, and so was Panis, and at least one other driver. But unfortunately, as is often the case at Silverstone these days, there's a lot of areas where you can run very wide like that, and the stewards have to police the areas. But there is Vaxivière, and again, the gap between him and Dillman just edging out ever so slightly. Not not as close as he was to him this time by. So it's all a little bit settled through there. Meanwhile, up at the front, Roy Nassani's got 12.5 seconds in hand over René Binder, and the little charge that we saw from Origev a while ago has definitely been and gone. He's now in the region of 4 seconds adrift, so this is definitely the most exciting battle we've got on the circuit at the moment.
Here is the race leader, Roy Nassani, down the hanger straight once more. And, well, he will not have had many more perfect days than this in his racing career. He didn't quite get pole position by 13 thousandths of a second, but he launched off the line absolutely to perfection and has thereafter really been on his own at the front of the field and continues to stretch his lead over René Binder. Certainly going to leave René Binder with some thinking to do, because the first person you want to beat is your teammate, and to be potentially 12, 13 seconds back at the flag, given that the cars will be near identical, leaves a lot of thinking to be done.
Absolutely, yeah, he'll be poring over the data after this one, and it's something you don't tend to see in other higher up categories like Formula 1 anymore, where you have these designed to degrade tyres, where as soon as one driver's in the lead, they back off as much as they can possibly get away with and just maintain a 2-second lead over the next car behind them. Yeah, it's been a little while since I saw a driver pull out a lead like this, particularly over his teammate, but Nassani, yeah, really, he would just quite happily stay out there until the thing ran out of fuel, wouldn't he?
Certainly would. And if he'll want to bottle this now over the summer break. We're next in action on the 10th and 11th of September at the Red Bull Ring, and I think Nassani will be off to petition the organisers to see if they could run that event maybe, say, tomorrow and Tuesday, because he is just really at one with the car. And it just sometimes happens as a driver that you get the car working exactly as you want it to, and you find that rich vein of form. Meanwhile, Bates Gavissa in pursuit of Alfonso Calis. That will make her charge a little bit easier, and that surely is a fairly hefty flat spot for Calis.
Yeah, he'll be experiencing quite a lot in the way of vibrations after that one. It's been a very low-key weekend for Calis, and the AVF obviously using the experience of Tom Dillman to help Calis along, but well, he's in the region of 3/4 of a minute behind the race leader at the moment, so it hasn't really been rubbing off particularly well for this race. He would perhaps, benefit from seeing what Roy Nassani has been doing with that car, because he's going superbly well. Now we have got some action with Dillman.
Here we go. Dillman runs a little bit wide out of Stowe. Vaxivière pulls the pin, tries to make the move, but again, Dillman knows exactly where to place the car. The question is going to be how much DRS maybe Louis Delatraz has got left to play with, and whether or not he can join in, because now Vaxivière up behind Dillman. What Dillman's struggling to do is get those corner exits nailed in the way that he was a couple of laps ago. The good news is he's only got 2.5 laps to try and claw on. All Vaxivière could have just darted to the inside then at Village. There was certainly a gap to the inside. He's not going to do it into the loop. Dillman moves across, comes back to the racing line, and already Delatraz right with them. Now Vaxivière, what does he do into Brooklands? He's going to be close enough to challenge. Anybody use DRS? Yes. Vaxivière is, he's kept it all in reserve for later in the race, and here's why he launches the inside. Dillman tries to shut the door, but Vaxivière goes through, runs out very wide. Dillman reclaims the place, and Vaxivière, in fact, loses out to Louis Delatraz.
Well, that just caps Vaxivier's misery on what has really not been a race that's gone very well for him, just as things finally seem to be turning his way, and he got a run down the inside of Dillman, locks up, runs wide, loses another place to Delatraz, and there's Dillman giving him a big old squeeze.
Well, it's very easy to be the armchair critic, but at the point where Dillman realised he couldn't squeeze him, that was the point Vaxivière could have run off the brakes and just let the car run into the corner. As it is, he kept the anchors on and then, of course, had to slither wide. So unfortunate for Vaxivière, he's done all the hard work, and now it's potentially Delatraz who is going to be the beneficiary. And for Louis Delatraz, well, 6th place, it's going to be more points in favour of the young Swiss, but he is still poised to lose a little bit of ground to Tom Dillman. All of this has given some relief to Aurélien Panis. And you might have noticed with Aurélien Panis and Mathieu Vaxivière, they're both running with the French flag on the nose cone in the Black Heart to pay memory and tribute and to the people of Nice and everybody affected with the awful events there last week. And of course, all our thoughts with everybody who has been affected. So a nice gesture by the drivers and the organisers to carry those logos on the car. Now, Vaxivière swings through the loop. He's trying to come back towards Louis Delatraz, but Delatraz, well, we'll see here whether or not he has got any DRS left available to him. Certainly the wing doesn't close up, doesn't either on Tom Dillman, and Vaxivier doesn't either. Roy Nissany has gone through to start his 24th and final lap of the race. And well, I'm running out of superlatives for Roy Nissany's performance today. This has just been the ultimate clicking of car, driver and circuit.
Yeah, the only thing he's not been able to do today is get pole position, and when there's just 13 thousandths of a second in it, that's not something you really grumble about. And he immediately fired that car off into the lead, and from that moment on, he's never once looked like being headed. And this is exactly the kind of pace we saw from him yesterday. You remember when he tracked down Orojev, finally managed to make a move on him at Stowe, and got past, and then we wondered if he might have a problem with this car. Well, he just immediately started pumping in fastest lap after fastest lap and pulled well clear. Today, he's had no such problems all the way and has just drawn further clear.
Meanwhile, a look at Beitske Visser challenging Alfonso Calis into Brooklands, and it's a repeat of a lap ago. Calis just outbrakes himself, runs wide, and Visser able to sneak past and snatch the final championship point on offer. Nissany just a few corners from home, swings through the loop, gets the power down into the Wellington straight. Not too many more bogeys for Roy Nissany to overcome. He just needs to get the car stopped in time at Brooklands and around Luffield, and then he's going to be home free. Our first double winner of this Formula V8 3.5 championship season. It means 4 races in succession where Nissany is either finished first or second, and that is a striking run from Nissany. He accelerates through Woodcote and does the double at Silverstone in the Formula V8 3.5 championship to the delight of the Lotus team. They celebrate once more on the pit wall and share the congratulations, not least because they have had the perfect race, because their second car, that of Rene Binder, is going to come home in second and be a season's best finish for Binder. And Igor Yuruchov gives some home satisfaction for the Arden team, completing the podium in third. Aurélien Panis holds on for fourth. Tom Dillman retained fifth from Louis Delatraz. And then Mathieu Vaxivier across the line in seventh, ahead of Vitor Baptista. Well, a race with plenty of talking points, Keith, and one which sets us up beautifully for the final 8 races of the season. Yeah,
Lotus really have found their way with that car at this track, and if they've got that kind of pace at some of the remaining races, and I remember they've gone very well at the Red Bull Ring in the past, this could be a very interesting second half of the season, and we could get a new challenger to Tom Dillman that we hadn't previously expected to see in the shape of Roy Nissany, who's absolutely flown. A near perfect weekend for Lotus, 2 wins, a second place and a third, and Roy Nissany, the first driver to do the double in this category with both wins on a race weekend since Carlos Sainz Jr. back at Paul Ricard in the later stages of 2014, as he went on to claim the title. And of course Sainz since then moving his way up into Formula One, where he's had an absolutely brilliant debut and has really been one of the exciting drivers of F1 of the past couple of seasons. But great stuff by Nissany.
Well, Nissany's going to let this slow down that last forever. Let's have a look then at the final classification, with Roy Nissany taking the win 17 seconds clear in the end of Rene Binder at the flag, and Nissany also claiming fastest lap. Igor Yuruchov rounding out the podium in third, clear of Tom Dillman, of course, who's classified fourth after Aurélien Panis losing that classification place with the earlier rate infringement in the race. Louis Delatraz in sixth from Mathieu Vaxivier, then Vitor Baptista, Hugh Kanemaru and Beitske Visser. So both Kanemaru and Beitske Visser in the points for Teo Martin Motorsport, and that was aided somewhat by Alfonso Calis struggling late on, and Pietro Fittipaldi retiring with that moment at Beckett's. In terms of the Drivers' Championship then, Roy Nissany leaps up to second in the points and is within touching distance of Tom Dillman. A good weekend at the Red Bull Ring could see Nissany topping the table. Louis Delatraz fades to third, ahead of Aurélien Panis. So Visser adding to her points haul in 13th. A hugely enjoyable race once more from the Formula V8 3.5s, but a lot of racing to go now. Nissany is having one of the slowest tours round to Parc Fermé I can remember, and why not? You can just see from the body language in the car, almost overcome with joy and emotion, punching the air in delight. Rene Binder, be very interested to see his body language when he gets out of the car, because he has had a season's best finish, but one could argue, been really quite soundly beaten by Roy Nassani today. And Igor Yuruchov, well, the weekend that promised so much, partially rewarded with a third place today, but it could have been a win yesterday. It could have been second place, and it still means that his championship charge hasn't quite kicked on into how he'd hope it would be. So Roy Nassani heads into Parc Ferme and is about to celebrate the double victory here at Silverstone. Rene Binder to a halt already. Jumps out of the car. It's been an absolutely perfect day for the Lotus team and a weekend to remember for Roy Nassani. He rear fixes the steering wheel and celebrates on the nose of the car. My goodness me, did he enjoy that. Roy Nassani, 2 wins at Silverstone. And didn't the Lotus team enjoy that as well? Nassani goes to receive their congratulations, celebrates with teammate Rene Binder as well. And just the perfect sweet spot with the setup for the Lotus cars. Igor Yuruchov, driving very solidly. Our top rookie once more was Louis Delatraz en route to 6th. And then just to confirm, because of that infringement early on for Aurélien Panis, it means that he was demoted 1 place in the classification. So Tom Dillman moves up to 4th. So again, 2 4th places for Tom Dillman. Solid points from the weekend. But his championship lead is now just over 25 points from Roy Nassani. We will be hearing in a moment's time from our race winner, Nassani. First of all, we will enjoy some super slow motion shots of our top 3 in action. You can just see how stiffly sprung these cars are. The drivers really having to grip solidly onto the wheel. But at the same time, just really smooth, progressive turns of the wheel from Roy Nassani. The car just looked absolutely magnificent today. Let's hear from our race winner.
Roy Nassani, Lotus team, what a fantastic achievement. The second victory here in Silverstone.
Yes, yes. First victory was yesterday and another consecutive one today. First double winner of the season. It's an amazing feeling. We saw our pace since Friday, amazingly fast on the top. Friday first session, Friday second session, beginning of yesterday also. And it was there, we knew it's possible, and we made all of our performance come out on track. And we did it. It's amazing, amazing.
Roy, now you're second in the championship overall. We had in the second part of the season, everybody's packing almost 50 points. Everything is possible.
Of course, of course. Well, Tom leading now is a good racer, but believe me, I'll do my best to catch him, and I believe I will.
Congratulations, Roy.
Thank you. Thank you.
Once more, Mathieu Vaxivière had pole position, and once more he got jumped as the lights went out. This time it was Nassani who led into Copse, with Rene Binder following through in second. The opening laps were absolutely ferocious, with some very, very aggressive dicing and jostling for position. In particular, Tom Dillman doing all he could to assert his championship lead, elbowing aside Louis Delatraz and leaving him to the clutches of Alfonso Celis. Delatraz looked to fight back. He and Dillman went side by side through Copse, which eventually gave Delatraz the advantage. Meanwhile, Mathieu Vaxivière, as ever, to be found in the thick of the action, dicing early on with Pietro Fittipaldi. Mid-race pit stops saw the AVF team pull an absolute blinder, with Dillman jumping Delatraz and Vaxivière, as Pietro Fittipaldi sadly retiring his Fortec car late on. Meanwhile, Vaxivière tried everything to overhaul Tom Dillman. That move didn't quite work out, and it meant that Delatraz was able to jump Vaxivière as well. Late on, Bijtske pressurising Alfonso Celis into an error, which promoted Visser up into the final points-paying place. However, for Roy Nassani, it was a weekend to remember, a double victory at Silverstone and an absolutely immaculate performance to score the win for the Lotus team, who was celebrating a 1-2 with Rene Binder in second and Igor Yuruchov completing the podium for Arden. pure joy for Nissani. Now the chance to celebrate at the end of a hard weekend of racing on the podium for the Lotus squad. Waiting for the drivers to be announced up onto the rostrum. As we said earlier on, it's a slight summer break now, but we're back in action on the 10th and 11th of September at the Red Bull Ring. Make sure that you join us for that. And then early October at Monza before late October and early November, the Spanish doubleheader at Jerez, and then the circuit to Barcelona, Catalunya. So into third place for Arden, Igor Yuruchov. Runner-up, René Binder. His best results of the season, his third podium in 4 races. And then our race winner, Roy Nissani, enjoying an incredibly rich vein of form, as are the Lotus team. And Nissani, understandably, beaming from ear to ear. Our top rookie today, Louis Delatraz. Delatraz not quite had the weekend he would have hoped for, a 10th and a 6th place. That means that he now slips to 3rd in the championship behind Nissani. And the winning team, of course, Lotus. Very, very proud moment for Roy Nissani on the top step of the rostrum at Silverstone. Second time this weekend, as we'll move into the presentation of the trophies. Third place for Igor Yuruchov, 4th podium of the season. And certainly, if things go his way, he could still be a factor in the championship. René Binder, next time out, it's going to be his home race. Nonetheless, a 2nd and 3rd place from this weekend. And that double race winner at Silverstone, Roy Nissani. Trophies presented by Jaime Alguersuari. Huge grin from Nissani. And that was just a drive to savour. Absolutely immaculate performance. We'll move on to the rookie presentation for Louis Delatraz. And the winning team, once more, Lotus. And of course, the Michelin Tire Award going to Roy Nissani as well. Well, it's been a wonderful weekend here at Silverstone in the Formula V8 3.5 Championship. As the drivers pose for the photos on the top step of the rostrum before making merry with the bubbly, it's time to say thank you very much for joining myself, Ben Evans, here at Silverstone. Had 2 wonderful races. The championship fight is very, very nicely poised as we turn our attention to the Red Bull Ring and then the second half of the season. Until then, it's goodbye from Silverstone.
huge bonus to get my teammate with me on